And hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's installment of our Life Care Leadership Interview Forum. I'm Steve Hartline for Talk 101.3 The Buzz and Mix TV, and, well, it is the Life Care segment this time. We're joined by the president of Life Care Centers of America, Todd Fletcher. Todd, how are you?
Good morning. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you so much. And a lady who you may have heard from before. She is Nancy Butner, Vice President, Life Care Northwest. How are you, Nancy?
I'm great, thank you.
Well, great to see you. Todd, I know that you're gathering, as we do this, as we tape this, many of your vice presidents from around the country at this time.
Yeah, we have our division vice presidents from around the country here this week. We're divided into 7 divisions across the country, so some of the major metropolitan areas. And they've all come. This is our first time getting together in about 2 years, so it's great.
Well, we are going to talk about, as we do, leadership, and this lady right here exhibited quite a bit of leadership at a rough time, a terrible time, not only for your company, for that part of the world, but also for the entire nation when this pandemic started. Of course, we're talking about Kirkland, Washington.
Yeah, they're in Kirkland. So Nancy and I have worked together for a lot of years now. How many?
Over 18.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And actually, Nancy was the executive director of Kirkland for about 15 years.
Mm-hmm. About 15 years, yes.
And then became the regional vice president and then divisional vice president.
So Nancy, take us back. First of all, so almost 15 years in the Kirkland facility, is that correct?
Yes, I ran that facility for 15 years. Mm-hmm.
This is very personal to you, obviously.
Extremely personal. Those staff are my patient, or the staff are my family. The patients are my family. And it was just stopped everything for me, I think, when I heard that we had COVID.
So going back, because you think about it, this nation, this world has been through so much since then. But let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to the beginning of 2020, back in February of that year. Not much was known about COVID-19. I mean, we were learning as we went almost. So take us back. How did you hear about the problem at your facility at Kirkland?
I received a call on February 28th about 11:30 at night from our local Department of Health, and they notified us that we had one confirmed COVID positive case. They told me earlier in the day that they were testing for it, so I knew it was a possibility. I didn't think it would happen. But yes, in fact, it was COVID positive.
And what was your reaction when you heard that?
Shock. I was worried about the staff, the patients, and just felt like the immediate need to go in there and kind of assess the situation.
Todd, you at the time were in California, West Coast operations head for Life Care.
Yeah. So I was living at the time about 45 minutes south of the facility there in Auburn, Washington, and had been traveling that week visiting our facilities in Southern California. So Nancy called me soon after she found out, and I think it took her a few tries because I was sound asleep, planning on being in Southern California the next day and then flying home that next evening. And it was very surreal, not sure at all what we were facing. We had done some reading and a little bit of studying, but in our minds, just planning on that not really affecting us any more than a regular flu season, I think. So.
Oh, but what we learned since then is we're all still grappling with it. So you find out, what was your first move? What did you do as soon as you said, okay, it's positive, now what do we do?
I called our corporate office, and we had a Zoom call within just a few minutes with the leadership, clinical services, Todd, anybody who was awake at that time.
I don't think I knew how to get on Zoom at that time. That was
See,
pretty
all
early on.
this was
It was it was
Conference
a phone
call. We had a conference
Sorry,
call.
you're right. It was a conference
back in
call.
the phone call days.
That's right. That's right.
Zoom is the same as conference call
Middle
now.
of the night though.
Yeah.
It was in the middle of the night. We had a couple of
that
conference
one.
calls that night.
Yeah.
To just decide what we were going to do very quickly.
Yeah.
Of course, those first two positive cases that really made national and international headlines happened in a hospital, Evergreen Hospital there in Kirkland. How many miles away was that from us?
Like 5 miles.
Yeah, very close. It was our main referring hospital. So they had two patients. One of them was ours that had tested positive at that time. But what Nancy knew pretty quickly was that we had other patients in our facility that were exhibiting symptoms of something, right?
Yeah. We had staff were calling out sick the day before, about 10 staff in one day, which is highly unusual at the time. So we knew something was going on. There weren't a lot of patients that were sent out before that day, typical kind of one or two. But after that, it changed drastically.
Do you know how the virus got into Kirkland?
There's lots of people have tried to predict or identify the original source. There was too many to really, I think, identify the first patient with COVID.
And then the newness of everything, as far as the uncertainty, the virus comes into this country, and you just said it, national, Todd, and international coverage began to descend upon the life care of Kirkland.
Yeah. Yeah, so the next morning I hopped the first plane I could out of Orange County and went back to Seattle, went to the facility, and there was already a lot of press out at the street. It became, headline news very, very quickly because there had been rumors of maybe the first COVID person in the United States had come from China north of Seattle in a city called Everett, Washington within the month before that. But that did not, we just knew there was a COVID person. And then at some point it began to spread, around the Northwest and around the West Coast, obviously before that time at Kirkland. But we had a few ideas as to how maybe it came in, but nothing really confirmed.
But Nancy, one thing I think we've all learned is how connected our world is. And to think about maybe a person coming into the state of Washington and now what we've all seen over the last almost 2 years.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? You think about the connectedness of our globe, really.
It is. Actually, what was unique about the first Kirkland patient was that on the 27th, it was the first time the United States could ever test for COVID from somebody that haven't traveled out of the United States.
Yeah.
So that was the first diagnosis of somebody that acquired COVID in our country.
Exactly. And let's talk about that because in seeing some of your previous interviews and preparing for this meeting today, what was the federal response like? As far as I know, their testing, like you just said, was not really available. You went to a local Walmart, I believe, and bought sheets or something like that. I mean, the PPE was simply not there.
On onset, there was rumors of COVID. Right? We had been learning about COVID, so there was already a PPE shortage. When we started the Kirkland outbreak, we had one sleeve of N95s. We had a box of gowns. We had a few face shields, lots of gloves, and we had ordered all these things. We just couldn't get them. So from onset, there was a significant lack of PPE. We worked, with COVID with no PPE. Initially, we did request it from our local Department of Health, from sister facilities. Just people would bring PPE by. The community was very giving. But the COVID tests, you couldn't even get at that time. They tested the handful of patients they tested, and then we waited 5 days before we could test any more patients. And we had to go get N95 fitted so we could do more tests. And then we did 18, and then the next day we did another 12, but it took 5 to 7 days to get the results. So it wasn't until a full week until we tested all symptomatic patients.
Todd, those early days, not much available.
No, it was a very scary time because we were learning as quickly as we could. We had lots of interested people, in this nation wondering what was going on in the facility. But meanwhile, we had 120 lives inside that facility that we were caring for, and staff was caring for, and so just lots to do. For us, it was never political for us because right from the beginning we were trying to save lives and help support the caregivers and the nurses in the facility. So that was one thing we did learn very quickly was we could not test. We knew that they had tested our patient at the hospital, and we knew we had more symptomatic patients in the facility. So since then we've learned a lot about cohorting. We have color-coded wings. When patients come into the facility, we test and we put them on a wing first to make sure that they don't have COVID. That's a yellow wing. Then they can move to a green wing, which means they are negative. And a red wing would be patients that have COVID. So, but very quickly, I remember right at the beginning, one of our healthcare executives with our state association there in Washington State said, Todd, my understanding is there's really only a couple more weeks of supply of PPE left in this country. And I didn't even hardly understand what that could mean. I had never run out of supplies before that we just could not get. Then after that, it became an issue with once suppliers, vendors found out that we had positive COVID in that nursing facility, some of them decided that they were going to pull out and not service us. So that became a huge issue, which was actually very surprising. So, yeah, even our medical supplier said they would drop supplies in a parking lot. I don't know.
Yeah, but they wouldn't come on.
They wouldn't come on site.
Grounds.
Lab wouldn't come to the facility. Yeah.
Radiology. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Nancy, the human impact. So again, this was very personal to you, and I want folks to understand that. You spent so much time, nearly 15 years in that facility.
Yeah.
Talk about your team, your staff, especially at that early time.
They were absolutely amazing. If they didn't have signs or symptoms, they came to work, and it was endless hours. It was 7 days a week. They are a team that if you ask them to do something, they just step up and they do it. There was no question. And we weren't doing our routine jobs. Our payroll person was serving food, was stocking supplies, anything. I mean, they just would help no matter what until they couldn't do it no more. And it was extremely, extremely emotional during that time. The calls were endless, and that was a very difficult part of it. With media calling, I mean, it was just kind of everything you could think of. People would call and have a cure for COVID or want to help, but the help wasn't, kind of what you needed. But it was extremely difficult. The patients going to the hospital, the deaths, it was unbearable at times for sure. 39
died, 67 of your staff positive, you've said in previous interviews.
Yes, 101 positive patients.
Out of 121. So
and the staff were becoming sick so quickly.
Yeah.
Nancy's leadership in that facility was critical with her staff because so many of them were still there that remembered her as the administrator. And we did learn, again, it was reinforced how important communication is. I remember, I think, Nancy, you had a meeting or a conference call with them every day, I think, with the staff. Yeah. And so if they weren't at the facility, if they were sick, if they were home scared, They could call in on that conference line, and it was just kind of an open line that they would all have conversation about what was going on. Also learned how to communicate in a better way with our families and loved ones of the patients. That was a major challenge because they, of course, had questions, and they could not come into the facility. We had to shut it down. There had been visitation up until we realized what we had, and that was the first time that kind of thing had ever happened. We had never barred visitors from a nursing center before. So very, very different, very scary for families to find out they can't come in to see their loved one.
Nancy, talk about the families. Obviously, they're unbelievably sad and just a horrible situation.
Yeah. It absolutely was devastating. Everybody was scared. Everybody wanted information. At that time, we didn't have group texting. We didn't have everybody's email. We communicated via telephone or in person. So we had to adapt very quickly to how to effectively communicate. We had some errors and some trials, but we figured it out. 95% of the families were devastated, but supportive, but understood, and I think appreciated the care that our staff provided. There was a few that didn't feel that way, and I understand that, but it was, to see their loss was my loss, for sure.
And I know even in the early days, and Todd, you and I have spoken about this privately, and that is, you said, we're going to be upfront with the public. We're going to be proactive instead of reactive. And I know that was Life Care's stance even in the very beginning.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We needed a few days to wrap our arms around it and figure it out. But after that, we were as transparent as we could be with what was happening in the facility, with our families, with our staff, with those daily conference calls. And even with our Department of Health, with the CDC, we were engaged with them every day. With our local surveyors, I had called them on day one and gave them information. So it was very open communication.
What does it mean to you, and I hate to say it, when we hear Kirkland, we now attribute to the pandemic? What does that mean to you?
For me, I'm proud of them.
Yeah.
I'm extremely proud of that team, of that community, of the relationship that we had with our hospital, with all the agencies that we worked with. I'm extremely proud of what we did and how we handled it. It also was very emotional. But I think, and people have told me if it was going to happen to any place, it was good it happened to Kirkland because they could handle it. The team there was able to manage that very difficult situation. So I'm extremely proud of that team.
Todd, same question. Kirkland, in so many people's minds around this nation, they go back to that. What does that mean to you?
That team of associates there in that facility really was incredible. And being the first, we were learning things as quickly as we could. And then one of the tasks we had was to share what we were seeing in the facility, because the symptoms even changed early on. We learned about the symptoms. We learned in that facility how quickly a patient could deteriorate from COVID, which was unlike anything we had seen in a skilled nursing facility before. So one of our major issues, though, right at the beginning was to take care of that staff, just for that very reason, but also because we needed staff to take care of patients. And that became very, very challenging for us. So Nancy and I spent a lot of time trying to staff 3 shifts a day, 7 days a week, in those first few weeks, trying to figure out how we could keep doing that, because so many had either gotten scared and left, or they got sick and left, and the protocols were not in place from any level of Department of Health as far as what to do at that point. Could you even get tested? No, you could not get tested, but maybe do you go to the hospital? Well, the hospital wasn't going to take you if you had signs and symptoms of that, and so it was very, very difficult. Not prepared at all to handle the level of press focus that we received, and you've got national media at the curb. So we learned very quickly that we needed some help with that, because that was more than a full-time job, and we had lots of support here from Cleveland, Tennessee with that. They found us somebody that could come out there and be on site every day whenever we needed him. So, but really we had more than a full-time job to try to take care of each of these lives in the building. That had to be our focus. So.
You know what, we go back to the end of December of 2020, and hope came in a vaccine. And then the vaccines began to, now of course 3 of them, and now talking about boosters. Seeing what you saw, being where you were, and so personally involved in this, what do you make of the vaccine misinformation, the controversy about vaccines, when by all cold hard numbers, it's very apparent that the vaccines are working and are benefiting people?
Yeah. I think certainly a vaccine believer.
Yeah. Me too. I'll go ahead and tell you. I'm a long hauler, so I understand.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll tell you, in December, right, we were prepping for getting the vaccination. I oversee 26 buildings. 13 out of 26 buildings were COVID positive. And that at that time, that meant that you had anywhere from 70 to 95% of your patients were positive. And we would lose anywhere from 10 to 15 or more patients. And that was in a 4 to 6 week period. So we lived this every day, the stress of that. So knowing that vaccine was coming and that it could make a difference, we didn't know how much, but we felt confident in it. It was like Christmas in December. It was wonderful. Yeah. So we started receiving those vaccinations. Come mid-March, our numbers dropped.
Yeah.
Down to next to nothing compared to what we've been through. So the vaccine made an absolute difference in our industry and in our country and our ability to staff our facilities. And so when people, I think, get caught up in maybe a philosophical reason not to get vaccinated, political, religious, whatever it is, for me, it's about going beyond that and being selfless and getting vaccinated for those that you love, for those that you work with and for, so that we can stop this pandemic. So I'm very heartfelt about it.
Todd, me too. What about you?
Well, as Nancy said, it was very personal, and of course, COVID has been compared to war. And when you're in the middle of a war and you're losing lives, when there's news that there's anything that can help, and the word was vaccine, this is going to help. If it's going to help save lives in the middle of that war, you're very open-minded to the effects of that vaccine. So again, it was so personal for everybody, anybody who is in healthcare, because it's so sad. It's so sad to see the effects of COVID, and the health battle that people were waging. So when it becomes that personal, everything else is just kind of thrown out the window.
Because in those early days, if someone would have told you when you were having these calls and it's just hair on fire type of time, and they say, well, let me tell you, here in about 12 or 10 months, we're going to have something that's going to be a game changer. I would say you would grab onto that and be
absolutely
as joyful. And folks, these are people who lived the very beginning of this and the uncertainty of this. If you're listening on the radio and you're not seeing this sign over my shoulder here, and I appreciate so much our producer, Gideon Ratcliffe, you're listening to the Life Care Centers of America's leadership series that we've been doing the last several months. We're on Talk 101.3 The Buzz, and we are joined by Nancy Butner, who really was the public face of Life Care and so many national interviews in the aftermath of Kirkland, and of course VP of the Northwest, I believe.
Yes.
Is that right? And then Todd Fletcher, who is a long-suffering Seahawks fan. He is the president of Life Care Centers of America. Really, just one more question, and that is this. Nancy, the legacy, the lessons, This is a leadership series. You showed extreme leadership. I heard communication a second ago. What's the legacy of this situation, and what are some lessons that we can take from it?
I think when I think about, we learned a novel, right, through COVID. I think as far as leadership, I think you can do more than you think you can do when you need to do it. I never dreamed I would be a part of leading through the pandemic, at Kirkland. But I would have been nowhere else. And I think that the staff they'll take direction if they trust you. And through trust, you show up every day and do what you need to do to support them. And they will lead, they will follow you, I think it's amazing what people will do when you need to do something.
The human spirit.
Yeah.
Todd Fletcher, I'll give you the final word. Same question.
Well, Nancy said it very well. I think when people know how much you care and they can tell that you care and you're there for them, trying to support them doing what they are doing, these people were, the word hero has been bantered around so much, but they truly were heroes. There's been, tens of thousands of them across this country. So also, though, things that people did that weren't there at Kirkland, we had a support system here in Cleveland, Tennessee that was just amazing. There was a lot of leadership shown here in Tennessee by our corporate team that was working hard day and night trying to figure things out for us, and then knew that there was the possibility that this could roll across the country. So the commitment of a leader, the care of a leader, the care of a community, the community of Kirkland was amazing. We had a lot of criticism during that time, but that small community, actually it's a suburb of Seattle, so it doesn't seem very small, but on the east side of Lake Washington there, Kirkland was amazing. And that came clear back here to Cleveland. We had videos that were sent from Cleveland to us from local pastor Jordan Easley, the mayor of Cleveland, Kevin Brooks. So it really was fantastic. A lot of people stepping up and just showing leadership during that time.
Our friends from Life Care Centers of America, and hope you enjoy your time getting back together with these people the first couple of years, and we're going to let them go do that. All right, that has been this month's edition of our Life Care Leadership Forum. I'm Steve Hartline for MixTV.tv and Talk 101.3 The Buzz. We'll see you soon.